Hello, Professor Chetan. Do you hear my voice?
Yes, Gizha, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. I will start the course, right?
Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to International Short Course 2024. Meet me again, Gizha Syarifa. I will be the moderator for the second session. The second session will be delivered by Associate Professor Chetan S. Mukundan from Axxonet Institute, Banglore, India, with the topic Digital Forensic Reveals International Crime. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know, digital forensic is a branch of forensic science that includes the recovery, investigation, examination, and analysis of material found in digital device, often related to mobile device and computer crime. Digital forensics has a variety of applications used in the process of investigation or investigation in a case. Ladies and gentlemen, a typical forensic process includes Caesar, forensic imaging, and analysis of digital media, followed by the creation of a report of the evidence collected. Digital forensics needs to be further utilized to identify digital-based criminal activities that cross jurisdictional boundaries and externalize crime risks while uncovering the digital infrastructure that facilitates concealment, currency conversion, and related illegal financial control. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before start the conversation, I would like to read Professor Chetan S. Mukundan curriculum vitae, but there is a lot of experience in Professor Chetan curriculum vitae, so I will read some of them because our time was limited. Professor Chetan is a founding director of Axxonet and is instrumental in its success in the fields of homeland security, forensic systems, and medical device. Professor Chetan has some forensic product created in Axxonet, which is one of them DARPAN, Distribute Autonomous Real-Time Profile Acquisition Networks. Professor Chetan has some research project which is measuring arm and hand movement parameters in Parkinson's disease using a globe with multi-parameter sensors and electrophysical and clinical correlates of facial emotion recognition in schizophrenia versus bipolar disorder. Now, Professor Chetan, this session will be divided into three parts. The first one is giving the materials. The second one is question and answer, which contain the session. And the last one is closing. You will have 1 hour 40 minutes. Are you ready to begin your presentation, Prof?
Yes.
Okay. Rich, now the time and screen is yours.
All right. Great. So thank you to start. Thank you for having me here as a part of the session. I can only see you, Gizha, so that's fine. It's nice. I'm assuming that audience, as you mentioned earlier, are undergraduate students who are attending this course. I would also assume that they have some kind of technology background, right? Or are they law students? Gizha?
Sorry, Prof?
Are participants more from the law side or from the technology side?
Yeah, most of them from the law side.
From the law side. Okay.
Yeah.
So then what I'll try to do a little light and not get too technical.
Sorry?
I will try to keep it light and not too technical so that the students can also appreciate it. Right?
Okay.
Okay. So I suppose you can see me. And can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, I have started.
Not running yet, Prof.
Do you want me to share the screen?
There you go. What about now?
Yeah.
Start the screen share.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking to all of you about digital forensics today, right? And its importance and a few small tools which you can use without too much of technical know-how, right? In accessing systems and understanding what's been happening behind the scenes. So even as law students, you should be able to utilize some of these tools, right? Okay, great. Now, to give you an overview of digital forensics, the term digital forensics, of course, evolved a few decades ago, right, when the digital world came up. And today we also have the concept of cyber forensics, which tends to deal more with network forensics and so on. But I'm going to use a slightly broader term here and say digital includes cyber forensics, network forensics, mobile forensics, all of it, right? Traditionally, these days, what happens is when we talk about digital forensics, especially in the lab setup, it would probably mean only Windows and Mac-based forensics, right? So we're going to use a broader term where we're looking at the application of computer science, right, in an investigative process, right? So how do we use computers to investigate an event? It does not necessarily have to be, a computer-based event. It could also be a non-computer-based event where we then use computers, right, to analyze data, right? So in 2012, an ISO standard was also released, right, called 27037, which is an information technology security technique. There are a few more, right? Now, when we go into digital forensics or digital investigations, first, let's understand why do we need to go down that path, right? So what is the genesis? The genesis tends to be digital crime, right? Or any kind of crime where there is a digital footprint, right? Or a footprint which can be analyzed digitally, right? The reason why I'm saying that a footprint which can be analyzed is, for example, we have systems whereby you can take a bank statement, right, from a bank, a printed bank statement, scan it, put it into the system, and like that, scan thousands of statements and then see if the perpetrators have tried to perform some kind of money laundering, right? So it's not necessary that we have data in a digital form. It could also be in the form of a photograph, which we analyze, scan, and then analyze in the system, right? So the types of digital crime that are taking place today tend to be, of course, I'm sure it's the same in Indonesia too. We have cyber attacks. We have a lot of cyber attacks taking place, right? And that is people trying to get into your account, people trying to get into the university account or into your banking system. And usually it is for financial gain. At times, it could be other reasons too, right? Then we have data breaches. So this is another common thing that happens. All of you would have heard of various data breaches, Facebook being breached, LinkedIn being breached. I'm sure there would be local supermarket chains in Indonesia that have been breached. And then your username, passwords, personal details, your phone numbers, all of it gets exposed out there on the internet, right? Which could be very dangerous in the long term. Then we have online fraud, right? There is no limit to the ingenuity when it comes to online fraud. Online fraud could even be something as innocuous as a website that looks very genuine and probably ships customers things 50% of the time, but does not ship things to them the other 50% of the time, right? It could be partial fraud too. It does not have to be a very, very complex scheme. Okay. Then we have intellectual property theft, people breaking into the government systems, people breaking into private companies and trying to steal their know-how, right? And then sell it on the open market or sell it to the highest bidder. Online harassment, this is very, very dangerous, right? Cyberbullying is, it's been the cause for many a death among students, among young children. You may have come across the blue whale phenomenon that happened a few years ago, right? And you still have people who are falling prey to online harassment and cyberbullying. Then identity theft. There is no limit to identity theft, right? People trying to represent information and things that they're not, right? And financial crimes, right? Of course, it's again usually related to cyber attacks, and more often than not, there would be a financial angle to it. Oops. Now, the digital investigation process itself, right? These are a few things which you would do, right? Even as lawyers or future lawyers, this is something which you need to keep in mind. Make sure that the police or the investigative agencies have followed these processes, right? So essentially, the first thing we need to do is identify the right artifacts, right? What is the scope of our investigation? What are the things which we need to investigate? Do we need to investigate the person's phone, their laptops, right? Maybe some USB drives they've kept in their office, maybe CCTV cameras, probably DVD drives, which they've left around, right? It could be any kind of information. It could be physical logs. It could be an in and out entry in a physical tagging system, right? Or maybe in a fingerprint system to know that someone entered the facility and exited the facility. So first you need to identify what are the things you're going to investigate and what's the scope going to be. Then, of course, after that is collecting the data. And collection of the data is very critical, and the way we collect it, because when we collect data, we need to make sure that people cannot challenge that the data was tampered with, right? This is a big problem that happens if we don't collect the data correctly. The people sitting at the other end, the defendants, can claim that the data was tampered with, and the court may throw that data out or disregard it, right? And it also does happen that way. We have had instances where data has been tampered, right? Not necessarily by the investigating officer, but by third parties, right? Who have been able to infiltrate the system and tamper the data to, incarcerate someone else, right? To put the blame on some innocent person, right? We see that all the time. So collection is very important. Then we have preservation. So the preservation of the data, how well and secured is the data once you've collected it? Do you keep it in a safe? Do you keep it online? Do you keep it in the cloud? How safe is the data in that facility, right? Can someone hack into it and modify it, right? Change the data there. So those are some of the initial parts of an investigation. From there, it is normally handed over to digital experts, so who would examine this data, right, using forensic techniques, forensic tools, sometimes good old, just police work, going around, asking people, talking to people. And then, of course, after the examination, you would interpret the findings, right? You would perform an analysis, interpret the findings. Interpretation is very, very important. So, for example, if I were to transfer some money to Gizha, right, for some reason, say she calls me and says, I need to borrow this amount for some cause, and I send it to her, right? It may be very innocent, but there may be people who transfer money like this, right? And their reason is different. Maybe they're buying some substances or some things which are illegal. It could be money laundering, right? So maybe someone has stolen money from a third party, sent it to me, and then I send it across to another person, right? So I'm a part of the money laundering process. Now, I can claim innocence. I can say I had no idea about it, right? I was just told by my friend to transfer the money there. I received it, I transferred it, right? So the interpretation is critical in situations like this to understand if a person was really involved. Is it something that I've been doing every day, or is it a one-off thing, right? Is it something that I've done just one time? Then, of course, documenting all the information in a way so that the end users can access the data easily, the lawyers can access it easily. It shouldn't be one huge file, or I give someone a pen drive, right? And then the lawyer has no idea what to go through, right? It needs to be broken down. So documenting it correctly, indexing it, and so on is very important. And then, of course, reporting the findings to create summary pages, right? Create a small summary that the legal system can use. And of course, at times, you may need to go in and make a presentation and testimony, right, online, which I'm sure is a part of your curriculum, right? Things which you will learn. Now, the types of investigations that are carried out, digital investigations, right? One could be criminal investigations, right? So looking into things like cybercrime, hacking, fraud, identity theft, and so on. It could be network investigations, right? It is very common. You must have also come across it, right? An email has been sent from someone's email ID or from someone's house, right? And then the person says that I have no idea what this email says. It could be a threatening email, right? It could be something, say, like a bomb scare or an assassination attempt. But when you go and talk to the people, it may be some old people living in that house. They have no idea what you're talking about. What would have happened? Someone may have breached their network and then used their network to perform nefarious activities, right? So we need to have a detailed network investigation there to understand when did someone log into the network, when did someone log out, what were the data packets sent through that network. Then, of course, we have incident response investigations, right? That is, whenever such a breach or threat takes place, going in and following the right systems, right, to look at an incident. So it could be a company, right, that detects a data breach. So you may have noticed many companies, our airports, our airlines, our critical infrastructure, they're constantly monitoring their networks to try and see if someone is trying to hack into their network, right? If there's a data breach. And then the moment you find that someone is trying to hack into the network or hack into the server, then we need to take corrective responses, right? It's called incident responses. So we go in and perform some firefighting at that point in time, right? Then we have mobile data device investigation, right? So very often we pick up mobile devices, right? And people may want to, right, analyze the data and the contents of that mobile device if it is being used for some particular activity. Right. Now, this is a quick overview, right? This is with respect to the American system because a lot of it evolved from there. It originated from there, right? And then the rest of the world has adopted it. And of course, a lot has been done in Europe too, right? But having said that, of late, I would say Asia has moved far ahead, you know, compared to many other countries, the countries in Asia when it comes to uh, digital technologies, right? So the FBI formed their first CART team, that's a computer analysis and response team, in 1984, right? Way back then. And by the late 1990s, right, the CART team joined with the Department of Defense, right, in the Computer Forensic Science Lab, and they created the first forensic lab around this, right? And some countries have constitutional rights. So, for example, they have the Fourth Amendment to protect everyone's right from search and seizure. You have the Fifth Amendment in countries like the US, which say that I can decide not to give you information, right? And so then it becomes even more important to be able to go in and look at digital devices to see if something wrong was being done with those devices or in that environment, right? So investigating devices, as I mentioned earlier, was collecting the data securely, examining the data, presenting it, and then applying the relevant laws to that data that has been collected. And do note, digital forensics is very different from data recovery. I'm sure all of us have had a laptop that failed, a computer that failed, where the hard disk failed, or a mobile phone that has stopped working, and we may have lost critical data with that, right? We've just lost data. So in that case, what happens? You may go to your local, shopping complexes, markets, or a computer street where you have experts who will help you recover the data, right? They may or may not recover all the data, right? It's more a crash recovery. They're not so concerned about recovering all the data. They're not so concerned about making sure that they have a valid copy of the data first, right? But in digital forensics, we need to do that. The data collection mechanism is very important, right? Now, there are a few more areas that are attached to digital forensics, right? One is threat assessment, right? And risk management, vulnerability assessment, to go in and check how secure or insecure are the systems that are being used. Digital forensic people may be involved in that because, as I mentioned earlier, someone may hack into your network and then use your network or use your computer to perform something illegal, right? So we need to have skills to have vulnerability assessment to know if there was an intrusion, then network intrusion and detection, and of course, incident response, and then investigating the same, right? Now, we'll come back to some of these slides. I'd like to walk you through these are very few of the types of cyber crimes that have been taking place, digital crimes, right? So for example, just recently, just last week, an international cyber scam was busted in a place called Noida, right? And a Chinese national was also among them. This was in India, right? So 5 people have been arrested, right? Including a Chinese national, right? For cyber fraud linked to social media scams. And what happened was they have recovered 21 phones from them, 223 SIM cards, 2 laptops, and multiple ID cards, right? Which were probably being used to scam people online through social media. Right? Then just this week, there was a ransomware attack. So ransomware attacks, another big issue these days, right? So what happens in the ransomware attack? Someone hacks into your institution's computer systems and locks them down, encrypts all the data, and then says that unless you pay a certain amount of money, you pay us $100,000 or $1 million or $100 million, we will delete all the data, right? Ransomware attacks are interesting. Once there was a ransomware attack in a Scandinavian hotel, right? And what the hackers did was they encrypted the hotel system that was used to control the locks on the doors and all the systems, including the locks on the doors, right? Which means the locks, the electronic key cards, they stopped working. People couldn't get into their rooms. Those who were already in the room could come out because the locks are built that way. You can always come out. But people who were outside, they couldn't get back into their rooms, right? Because these hackers had locked everything down and they asked for a big ransom, right? To be able to unlock everything. And the hotel management did pay the amount because it was an inconvenience to the guest, though they did negotiate it. So similarly here, we're talking about a medical device manufacturer called Levanova, right? And so an ransomware attack compromised their systems, locked everything down in their company, right? And you could lose critical data. You could lose your source code. You could lose course material. Say if it's a university, you may lose all the digital records of the students, right? Their historical mark sheets, their degree certificates, all of it could be lost. So it's very important to be able to secure these systems, right? Then just last week, again, there was a cyber espionage group trying to target some of the critical infrastructure in India. Right? So these kind of things keep happening, and you need to keep monitoring it. And digital forensics plays an important and critical part of this process. Right? Now, it does not end there. Right? People will go to any extent to make money. So can you imagine? Hajj pilgrims have been targeted by scammers. We would assume the Hajj is something very sacred, something which people would never mess around with, right? We have the most amount of veneration for it. We're pious about it, but people haven't left even something like the Hajj alone. So people have created fake websites, right, or fake travel packages, and they're targeting people saying, we will take you there on Hajj for half the rate. But when you pay that and you reach there, you have no facilities. You've not been registered. You don't have a hotel, right? People are getting scammed in that way, right? So all of this becomes a part of the digital forensic investigations, right? Now, recently, again, just last week, a senator in the US, Senator Ron Wyden, right, has said the United Health Group, the United Health Group is a massive health group in the US. They own hospitals, they have insurance schemes, right? And the senator has said that their top management should be held accountable for a ransomware attack that happened on the company because they had not secured themselves appropriately, right? Now, just 2 weeks ago, or probably 3 weeks ago, there was a massive operation conducted in Europe, right, by Europol, of course, linked to Interpol. And this was a coordinated crackdown, right? And if you look at the countries who were involved, right, they had almost everyone was involved in Europe. You have France, Germany, Netherlands, right? So when we talk about digital forensics and its impact on global crime investigations, you can see how many countries may get involved at times in a crime investigation, right? So we had France, Germany, Netherlands, right? Including Denmark, United Kingdom, United States, Armenia, Bulgaria, Lithuania, all these countries, right? With 20 law enforcement officers from, again, Denmark, France, Germany, United States, coordinating this effort. They went in and took down 8 of the most wanted cyber criminals in the world, right? Now, these are what we call droppers. These are malware droppers. So what these groups would do is, you never know, you may have malware running on your phone right now. You may have malware running on your desktop or on your laptop, right? You may have malware within your university. You wouldn't know about it, right? They activate it on demand. When they want to, they will activate it. They penetrate the systems. They gather the data they want to gather, and then they could deactivate it. So nobody would even know it existed there. These are the names of some of them: ICE-D, System BC, Picabot, SmokeLoader, Bumblebee, and TrickBot, right? These are global malware systems that have been running across the world, right? And if you look at the number of servers, so of course, right now, very few individuals have been arrested. There are 4 individuals arrested, right? The arrest and the searches were done across 16 locations. And look at the infrastructure that has been taken down, right? The infrastructure that they have confiscated. Over 100 servers were taken down across Bulgaria, Canada, Germany, Lithuania, Romania, United Kingdom, Ukraine, to name a few, right? So these people had servers running across the world, right, collecting data, and they're ever ready to penetrate into one of your computers, right? Now, how does this work? What's the use of doing this? What would someone do with Bumblebee or SmokeLoader? What you can do on the dark web is, if you get on the dark web, you can contact people who have links to these people and say, I want to hack into this particular organization. They will go and check if they have malware installed in that organization. If they do, right, you pay them a certain amount, maybe $1,000, maybe $10,000, right? And they will give you access into the systems in that compromised company, right? So it's a very well thought of service, hacking service, that is sold. right? And if you look at it, more than 2,000 domain names were brought under the control of law enforcement, right? And look at the amount of money these people have made. They have made at least, right, 69 million euros, right, in cryptocurrency. They are not doing the hacking, right? So a point to be noted, they're not doing the hacking. They don't want to go in every day. They just go in, they install malware in companies around the world or in organizations, educational institutions. They then sell that to third parties, right? And they have made at least 769 million or maybe 70 million just by renting out their infrastructure to deploy this kind of ransomware and malware, right? So very, very interesting business models that have evolved over the years. So these are called malware droppers. They drop malware into critical infrastructure globally. And then you could deploy viruses, ransomware, spyware. I may want to spy on someone. It could be something big. It could be something where industrial espionage. It could be an attack on a country, right? Or it could be something very simple. You would be surprised. Someone wants to spy on a girl they like, right? And they do these things to hack into that lady's devices, right? It could be for something as frivolous as that, and they may pay a certain amount. They may pay $500 or $1,000 to be able to do that. So what are the phases involved in these kind of drop operations? We have infiltration, right? That is, the droppers will enter your systems through email attachments, maybe compromised websites. How many times have you gotten email saying that you have won something, right? Or click here, right, to win something. Or this is an invoice, this is a document from your friend, and you click it, and it may install some virus or malware on the computer. It could also do the same on your phone. So it could be on your mobile phone, and they could compromise your mobile phone. Now, the beauty of as I mentioned, is this: they will not engage with your device immediately. They may keep it in stasis for the next 1 or 2 years. They may not do anything with it. And when the time is right, they will go in and compromise your device, right? It could even be through bundled or legitimate software. There have been times when, so for example, some of the tools, for example, AmiDesk was compromised, right? It is a remote desktop sharing tool. They compromised it. So anyone who they went to the original manufacturer's website, they replaced the exe there with their own exe, right? So now anyone who downloaded that software and installed it on their computer thinking that it's legitimate actually downloaded the hacked software, which gave hackers access to everything on their system, right? So once they have installed the malware, right, they may execute it, and then it may obfuscate itself. So for example, it would have evasion techniques. It would go into the memory, it may be on your hard disk, it would hide itself, it may morph itself every few days and convert itself into something else so that the malware scanners or antivirus scanners cannot detect it. And then at a certain point, it will remain inactive. It would deliver a payload into your computer, right? So it's very interesting how this world works. Now, another recent scam that has taken place, it's actually in progress. We have board exams, and I'm sure even in your university, you have this concept of reevaluation. That is, if you don't agree with the marks, right, you may send your marks for reevaluation to your teachers, telling your teachers, no, reevaluate it for me, right? So what a group of scammers did recently was they hacked into the backend systems. They got the names and phone numbers of parents and students who had applied for reevaluation and started calling them, saying that we can help you get better marks, right? You've applied for reevaluation, but you have not passed. We will help you pass. Pay us so much money, right? And of course, the parents would think that since the phone numbers, they've got my phone number, how do they know me? They know my son's name, they know how much, or daughter's name, they know what marks my child has got. So it must be very genuine. And they pay them thousands of dollars, right? Thousands of dollars to change the mark, right? So this is another example of cyber fraud. Right? And just 2-3 days ago, right, there was another scam. This is how a group of scammers stole 120 crores. 120 crores is about 10 million. It's about $15 million, 15 million US from a university, from the bank, right? So what they did was they created email IDs, which I've highlighted here, which look very similar to the official email IDs, right? But these are not the official email IDs. And they sent emails. Hello? Yeah, they sent out emails, right, to people claiming to be from the bank and from the institution, and they actually managed to fool the. Yes. Do I continue?
Yeah, please continue, Prof.
Right. So they use email IDs like what you see, which looks very similar to the official email ID, and they fool the bank into transferring, right, money from the university account into their own private account that looked like the university account. They created a private account with the same name as the university account, right? But luckily, a vigilant bank manager, right? A bank manager, he noticed this activity and he got suspicious, right? And opened up an investigation immediately. And thankfully, law enforcement officers were able to recover almost the whole amount. About $14.5 million was recovered. And how did they execute their crime? One, they created fake mail IDs and they created fake letterheads and fake authority letters. So the bank thought that, some person finance in the university actually sent information to the bank to transfer the amount. They created fake KYC documents, right? And they created a fake university name. They created a fake bank account. They sent out deceptive emails, and then they transferred the money, right, to this account. So this is another way in which digital crime takes place, right? Okay. Now, if we look at, I spoke about this briefly earlier, right? What are the phases in a digital investigation? That is, we have identification, we have the preservation, right? We have collection of the data, examination of the data, analysis. So each of these has a sub-stage within it. So for example, identification would be based on the event and detection of the crime. Very often, we may not even detect that the crime has taken place, right? You may need to resolve signatures. You may need to perform some profile detection. You need to perform anomaly detection, right? In the identification stage, look at the complaints. Has someone complained? Very often people don't complain, right? We had an unfortunate case just yesterday where a student killed herself, right? Someone siphoned money from her account. She was a target of a cyber crime, right? Digital crime, financial crime. And someone conned her of all the money in her account. And she also borrowed money from some other students to give it to this person, right? And she lost all that money, right? Now, instead of going to the police and saying that, I lost this money, she was not from a very rich family, so she borrowed money from a lot of people. She probably invested that money in some kind of a scheme saying we will double the money or triple the money, or it's cryptocurrency related thing. But instead of going to the police, she killed herself, right? So at times, you may not have a complaint. Now, how did the police find out that she killed herself because of this? Because she left a suicide note saying, I'm killing myself because I lost all this money, right? What would have happened if she had not left that note? Right? She would have just been another number. They wouldn't have known why she killed herself. And she was just a victim of cybercrime, right? So complaints are very important. Where's the complaint coming from? Monitoring systems, auditing them. So that's at the identification stage. At the preservation stage, you need to have very robust case management tools, very robust imaging tools. When I say imaging, it's not a photograph. It is, I have a mobile phone that I have received. It's a locked mobile phone, right? Assume that this phone is locked. You don't have the PIN. What do? You need to have the tools to be able to go in and take an image of this phone, right? Even though it's encrypted, and analyze that image, right? So there are specific tools that do that. There aren't too many tools in the world that do that, but there are a few tools that can image a phone or an encrypted device, or even my Mac. The Mac I'm using is an encrypted Mac. So what happens if something happens to me, or if someone else wants to get into my Mac, law enforcement, and analyze it, and I cannot give them the username password? You need to have the right imaging tools to make an image of this device and then analyze it. Chain of custody. Chain of custody is very critical. As law students, since you're law students, I would say that 90% of the time, you can poke holes in a case because of the chain of custody, right? This is where a lot of our investigations fail, because we have not maintained chain of custody. And as a defendant lawyer, as a lawyer sitting on, depending on which side you're sitting, you can prove that, right, the chain of custody was not maintained, and someone had an opportunity to plant some data or evidence into that device, or maybe remove some evidence from the device, right, or modify it. Then time synchronization, right? Time synchronization is very, very important, because you need to know when was that evidence collected, right? So, for example, it's very common for my wife to complain about things I have done, right? She will say, you didn't do that thing I told you to do that day, or you forgot to do that, or you did that wrong, right? And at times I would tell her, yes, dear, but that was about 5 years ago. And she says, oh, that doesn't matter, right? There's no timestamp there, right? It's perpetual. It's for life now. I'll have to listen to it uh, as long as I'm on this planet, right? So time synchronization is very, very important. You need to know when that evidence was collected. Then the collection process itself, right? And you should have approved methods, approved software, legal authority to collect that evidence. If there's compression, if you're compressing the data, it should be lossless. So for example, if you've got thousands of images, if you're compressing the images, we need to make sure the compression is lossless. Otherwise, you may lose some critical data behind it, right? Sampling of the data, right? Now, you have recovered someone's laptop. So if you take my laptop, it has about 1 terabyte of data on it, right? And there may be one file you want out of it. So we may go through 900 MB of the data and not find what we want. In that case, do we turn around and say that, no, oh no, there is no data on it. We don't have the relevant data on it. That may be a dangerous thing to do, right? So sampling of the data is very important. How we sample the data is critical, right? You need to make sure you don't leave anything out in the process, right? Then data reduction, in case you need to reduce the amount of data, it should be done very carefully, right? And then, of course, recovery techniques. If I'm taking a backup, I need to make sure the backup can be restored. Then we will look at examination today. I'll show you a few small tricks on the examination front, right? So that you can understand how examinations are done, right? So even there, preservation is very important. You need to make sure that when you are examining the data, you don't modify the data in any way, right? So there needs to be traceability. So we should be able to, so for example, if I run a command and get an output, I need to be able to run that command again, right? And get the same output, right? We should have a trace of all the work we have done. How did we arrive at a certain piece of output data? We should be able to trace that, right? There should be validation techniques, for example, hashing techniques. There are filtering techniques to filter data. There are pattern matching mechanisms, right? So all of us have seen, say, Google Photos, right? We must be, I'm sure most of you use Google Photos, you store your photos there. Have you seen how easy it is to, look for your friend, right? Or if it's on Facebook, you tag a photo, and then if your friends put up photos, they will say, so-and-so has put up a new photo, right? How do we know that? It's through different types of pattern matching and recognition. So it could be facial recognition, it could be pattern matching. When I say pattern matching could also be matching of financial records, right? Someone comes into the bank and performs an illegal activity between 9 to 9:05 every morning, right? Because other people come into the bank after that. So you may have a pattern there. So getting those type of patterns is also very important, right? Then discovering hidden data. Very often you would have data hidden in the system. Don't we do this on our own computers also? Very often we'd find that we say rename a file so it does not look like that file. We may rename a folder. We may use hidden folders. I've noticed very often on phones, people use vaults, right? They would use a vault so that someone else cannot view, say, those messages or data or photographs, right? So you should be able to identify that there is hidden data in a certain spot and then be able to extract it, right? So it's two parts. One is discovering that the data is hidden. The second part is extracting it, right? Now, the analysis, of course, is, it depends. It could be very statistical in nature. It could involve data mining. At times, we have what we call e-discovery, right? You may have millions of emails. You need to discover one email out of those million emails. So we have data mining tools, right? We need to maintain timelines, report the timelines, look for links, interlink the data we found, right? Spatial data. What do we mean by spatial data? Spatial data means that I flew into Jakarta, I did something in Jakarta, right? And then from there, I flew to Bali and I did something else in Bali. Then from Bali, I moved on to Malaysia and did something in Malaysia. So getting spatial information would be to tie the data to where that data was either generated or acted upon or modified, right? Okay. And then, of course, presentation of the data is equally important. You will learn as time goes along, expert testimony, how to talk to the legal system, how to talk to the judge, right? And explain to them what you have found, right? So when we plan our investigation, we acquire the evidence, very important. We look at that, right? Usually there's an evidence form that we fill out. We would say this is the evidence that we have picked up, right? Then you would need to transport the evidence. You have to package it. It has to be secured, right? And it should be ideally put in an approved secure container, right? For example, if you take someone's laptop, if you get someone's hard disk, our normal process would be just put it into a bag or into a cover and maybe send it to the lab or to the law enforcement agency, right? That would be incorrect. Ideally, you would put it in an anti-static cover, right? Even if it's a laptop, we would put it into an anti-static cover first so that it does not get damaged by ESD during transportation. We may want to put that again into a foam container, right? So again, so that it does not get damaged, right, when it's being transported, right? Then, of course, while investigating, we need to prepare our forensic workstation, right? We would retrieve information, the evidence from the secure container. Usually, we would make a forensic copy of the evidence. This forensic copy may also be done at site. So very often, people will make a forensic copy at site and ask the person who is giving that forensic device to sign on a piece of paper saying that the device has been collected, a hash code has been generated. We generate these unique hash codes. The hash code has been generated, and it matches what they're seeing, and they would sign off on that to make sure that there is no tampering of the evidence on the way, right? The hash code also helps, for example, say this is a particular phone, right? Say, for example, I have an iPhone. Someone may replace that iPhone as it is being transported with another iPhone. So when it reaches the lab finds that, hey, I've got a blank phone, right? I've got a phone with no data on it. Or it may be a dummy phone. Very often I found that the more astute criminals will carry two devices, right? When I see criminals, it could also be people who indulge in illegal activities. They would have two devices. They would have one primary device that they use for their illegal activities, and it would be a separate number, and they would have this one device or phone number that they give everyone, right? They will come and give it to you. So if you call them, they would receive the call on that. And if something goes wrong, they would submit that device to the police saying, hey, I don't do anything wrong. Here's my device. And the other one, which they use for illegal activity, they would take and throw into a dustbin or hide it somewhere, right? Or get rid of it or break it and so on, right? So then it becomes very tough to trace it. So you need to make sure that you gather the correct evidence, right? Just to jump the gun here, it's sometimes what the police do is they use call data records, CDR analysis. They will try and see how many mobile phones, for example, were active in a particular area, right? Or in a particular building, right? They will try and determine how many phones were with that person at that time. Then they will say, I have recovered only one phone from you, but I think you have two phones, and two phones were active, right? It's not always easy to prove that, but it takes some amount of work and legwork by the police agencies. It takes some time too, right? Then we have an evidence custody form that helps document what is done. I will show you what the form looks like, the single evidence and multi-evidence form. Here's an exam. This is only an example of a form, right? So it's used to be, this form is to be used for example, 1 to 10 pieces of evidence. So you describe the evidence, the item number, what is the vendor name, what is the serial number, right? And so on. Right? You create a detailed description, then you would describe where's the evidence placed, right? So just a second, I need some. Just hang on, I forgot to get myself some drinking water. I'm just going to, just give me a second, I'll ask someone to send me some water.
Okay, Prof.
Hello. Hi. Hey, can you send me some water in my room? I forgot to bring some in, right? Pani. Hello. हाँ थोड़ा पानी भेज दो तुम. Thank you. Right. Okay. Normally I don't talk continuously for so long, but I can't see any of you. Otherwise, normally you'd have some questions in between and so on. So this is what an evidence form can look like. It does not need to be the same, right? But something similar is also okay, right? So evidence placed in the locker, item number, who was the evidence processed by? For example, if there were 5 phones, who picked up each of the phones, right? And who deposited the evidence at what date, at what time, right? So that's what a form looks like. It's just a sample. Here's one from another police bureau. They assign a case number, right? Then the investigation unit number, the name of the case, if they've given it a name yet, right? And the location where the evidence was collected, right? Description of the evidence, the vendor's name, again, serial number. So it's very important. For example, if you've got my phone, you may not be able to get the serial number. You may not even know which model of the phone it is, right? Because it may be locked. Right? In that case, you may not be able to write down the model serial number unless someone gives you that information, right? So it's very important to note down as many features as possible, right? So for example, if I were to show you, say, this phone, you wouldn't even know which phone it is, right? Or say a third one, which I carry with me, you would be able to identify this because this is an iPhone. So you'd say it's an iPhone. But if I were to tell you, ask you, which phone is it a iPhone 12 or 13 or 14, it may take a bit more work, and you may not be able to get the serial number out of it, right? So it depends on how you've collected the evidence. So for example, if you've received a phone from a deceased person, you can't go and ask the deceased person to unlock the phone, right? It may not work. So you need to write down as much information as possible here while collecting the digital evidence, right? Thank you. So always use secure evidence bags, right? Special secure evidence bags to catalog the evidence. They should be ESD protected, right? And use computer safe products, anti-static bags, anti-static pads, right? Well padded containers. In the older computers, they would get spoiled easily. But now with SSD disks, it's less. But having said that, my mother dropped her phone a week ago and the motherboard cracked internally, right? So if a device falls, right, it's not necessary that it has a hard disk, it could get damaged. And once the motherboard is damaged, it's not easy to recover the data from it, right? And then, of course, make sure they use evidence tape. So I'm sure you learned that in your other courses too. But the part that's important is the anti-static and padded containers. Mark it appropriately and so on. Now, for high-tech investigations, especially in the private sector. So when it comes to investigations, what type of investigations take place, right? When it comes to digital forensics? One obviously is where law enforcement is involved. When does law enforcement get involved? Law enforcement is involved the involvement is whenever there's a death, if there's a heinous crime, right? Something say like physical assault or rape, they would get involved, right? When there is, say, financial crime, someone steals money from my account, I go and complain, or an institution has money stolen from it, right? But there is a gray area around that. What if you lend me money, right? You lend me money on a goodwill basis, right? And I say, oh, we're friends, so I will return your money in a few weeks. And I don't return the money, right? I just don't. What happens? Can you go and file a case? You can probably go and file a case, but then I can go and tell the police, no, when he gave me the money, he said it was a gift, right? When Gizha gave me the money, she said it's a gift. So I took it and I spent it. She did not say that she's giving me a loan. Where is the proof? Show me a message, show me a document. There's no document, right? So in that case, law enforcement may not be able to intervene, right? Or she sent me money to buy something she asked me to buy vegetables. So I bought a lot of vegetables and I gave it to her, right? And the money is gone now. I don't have it. So in that case, law enforcement may not be able to enforce, the law. Now, similarly, say you're a private company, say it's the university, right? Now, somebody starts sending emails to another colleague internally in the university, right? Using the same email ID, but it's spoofed, right? you may or may not be able to go to law enforcement immediately. Say, for example, if it is something obscene or if it is something threatening, then yes, we can go to law enforcement, right? But if it's just a random email saying hi, or if it's a forward, how many of us have received forwards on WhatsApp or Telegram from, namaste, Deepana Milligan, right? How many of us get messages like that? क्यों? भरा है, कोई बात नहीं, right? Can we go and complain to the police every time sends us something like that? No, right? So they will take cognizance only if it is something that they feel, could result in some kind of physical harm. Otherwise, say if a boy just keeps messaging a girl saying, hi, how are you? It does not say anything obscene, does not say anything bad, does not even say things like, say, I love you, but just keep sending forward, sending jokes, right? Not obscene jokes. Can you go and complain? At the most, you can block them. Then he uses another phone number and starts sending material again. You block that. Use a third number and start sending material again. At the most, in the end, people get frustrated and change their own phone number, right? So when it comes to the private sector, it is very important how we approach, right? Even as lawyers, when you go in and you're trying to figure out a case, right? How do you approach the data breach or this content? How illegal was that act, right? And make sure you use the correct techniques in the investigation, right? For example, employee termination case. Just last week, there was a report of a person in Singapore, right, who was arrested because he deleted 100 servers of the company he worked in, right? They hosted on one of these public hosting sites, right? Like you have Amazon, Microsoft, Google. They were using one of them. Now, what happened was he was fired from the company last year, right? Around December last year, he was fired from the company and he had to leave Singapore because of that. But he got another job in Singapore and went back to Singapore. May not have been as highly paying, right? And now here's the thing. The company was secure. The company used a VPN. The company used secure networks, right? But you know what happened? When he quit the company, his friends were from the old company, right? When he was thrown out. So when he went back to Singapore to live in Singapore, right? He lived with the same friends who were still working in the same company. He then managed to get access to their laptop, logged into the company network. Now, one thing the company did not do right was to disable his user ID password when they fired him. His user ID password continued to work. So he logged in with that user ID and password and deleted all the servers. The company lost about $1 million of work in the process, right? Now, of course, they did not know what had happened. They took many, many weeks to figure out this is what actually happened after using digital forensics, right? So you have to be very careful in cases like this, how you approach it, right? So, for example, workplace termination cases, it can create a hostile workplace, right? So, for example, it could also be at times it could be me leaking information about the company, performing some inappropriate acts, maybe not working, sending inappropriate emails, viewing pornography in the workplace, playing games in the workplace. So you should have appropriate policies in place as a company to make sure that these things don't happen. And if they do happen, the LEAs may or may not get involved directly. It depends on what was lost, right? And otherwise, you may need to call in private investigators, right? Then internet abuse investigations. This is very common. Someone using your home network, using your, say, university network, or going to public hotspots. How many times do we go to a coffee shop? Right? What if I go to a coffee shop and then use that coffee shop's Wi-Fi to send out an email to someone, say a threatening email? Usually the ones that work are, say, something like a bomb threat, or something about drugs, right? Now, when the law enforcement agencies go back and they trace it back, they will trace it to the coffee shop. They'll say, oh, this coffee shop has public Wi-Fi, someone has used it. Now, beyond that, it may become very tough to investigate who sent that information, right? Because they may have used something like Proton Mail, which does not log or track the person's IP address, right? And the person has disappeared. So in that case, hopefully you have some CCTV footage around, right? Which you can use and try and at least map it down to these were the 10 people in the coffee shop at that time, right? If the coffee shop has a CCTV, the coffee shop may not have a CCTV. There may be a CCTV on the road. So it just makes the investigation that much tougher, right? But of course, once you do find the person who has performed, say, this particular person, you feel this person may have sent that email, the person will say, no, I didn't send that email, right? I did not send that communication, right? So then you need to go in and check, did they send it from their phone? Did they send it from their laptop? Seize that device, search through the device, right? And of course, they may have used, how many of us use Google Incognito, right? Many of us, right? Whenever we want to go to a website where we don't, it may not be anything illegal, right? It may just be that we don't want a particular website to track us, right? Because we find it painful. So in that case, we may use Google Incognito. What does that mean? It will leave no trace of that activity on our local computer, right? So going and extracting that data becomes even tougher. At times, we may need to approach Google and try and get that data, right? Now, contact your network firewall administrator, right? If you have that information, right? And analyze the drives. Now, for email abuse investigations, right? One is internet abuse, the other is email. You need to get the emails, right? Preferably, you would get server logs. If it's just the email which is on my system, so for example, if I use Google Mail, right, I have nothing on my computer and I refuse to log into Google. I say, no, I don't use Google, right? But you know there's a particular email ID which is associated with me. You feel that that's the ID. How would you go about logging into that ID? You may not even be able to log into the ID because you don't know the username, you don't know the password, you don't know the recovery phone number, you don't know the recovery email ID, right? In that case, you need to approach Google, right? The LEAs would approach Google, write to them saying that this case is of interest to us, of national security. We need to be able to log into it. Now, if that Google ID happens to be in Indonesia, Google may comply. But if that email ID happens to be hosted in the United States of America, or maybe in the UK, if your email ID is hosted there, right, Google may refuse because Google will say, you need to approach the US government and have the US government tell us to release that data. You may have come across many cases in the recent past where the FBI has approached Apple and asked Apple to unlock their phones, and Apple refuses in the US. Right? In the US, Apple refuses. They say that no, we cannot unlock it because it would go against the Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, right? So we cannot. But in a lot of other countries, especially in Asia, law enforcement agencies have the right to unlock it, right? But even there, Apple may not comply. We would need to go to a third party and perform that operation. So for email systems that store user messages on the central server, we need access to the server. We need access to the computer at times, which was used to send those emails, right? So all of that forms a part of our email abuse investigation, right? So ideally, we would obtain electronic copies. Now, if you look at an email, you would find that every email has a header in it. So for example, One second. Okay, no, my Google client does not show me the header. I'll have to export it and then re-import it to be able to show you the headers, right? One second. Show original. Yeah, I got it. Now let me just. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, Prof.
Email open? Okay. Right. So this is an email created on June 13th at 12:34. It's from someone called Selva Guru from TUSER. It's to a colleague of mine. It's a confirmation letter to the company, right? To our research organization for a recertification audit, right? Now, it was delivered to this email ID of mine. It was received. Now, all of this forms a part of our email header, right? Now, using this header, I can trace back where this email came from, right? It has a lot of other information too, right? Which IP address did this email come from, right? Where was it received from, right? So this is an designated domain that it came from, and trace it back to see if it was actually sent from a particular location, right? That was just a very, very quick overview of what a header looks like. There are specific tools that we can use to analyze email headers, right? And I won't go into this. Then, of course, we have industrial espionage, which is an important part of digital forensics, right? I'll jump through that. Now, whenever you start a forensic investigation, make sure that we have a few of these things. The most important thing, if you're getting someone else's hard disk, is a write blocker device, right? To make sure that you don't modify that person's system in any way, right? Then, of course, digital forensic acquisition tools. There are paid tools. I will show you some free tools today, right? And of course, special acquisition devices, right? You set up your forensic workstation with disk editors, text editors, graphics viewers, and so on and so forth, right? Now, conducting an investigation, right, we would need all the original media, right? The custody form and so on, okay? And of course, you may need to gather further evidence from people involved in the case, right? Now, there's something called bitstream copies that we use. Whenever you get a device, say a hard disk or a phone, and you make a copy, right? How many, all of us copy files. We copy files from our computer to a USB drive, right? Or to online drives, maybe OneDrive, Google Drive. We zip files and send them, right? But those files can be tampered. So we have something called bitstream copies, right? That is, you take the original device and bit to bit, you make a copy of that device, right? Every bit on the hard disk, you take every bit and you make an exact copy of the original device. And this is then stored as a virtual disk, right? So it's also called an image file. So you would have an image file which we can then analyze. So this is what a bitstream copy would look like. You have the original disk, you create an image, right, of that disk. So why do we do this? We need to preserve the original evidence, right? Okay. Now, you may have a USB drive, so you could do the same thing. You can analyze the USB drive with, create a bitstream copy of it, and then analyze it. Another reason why you may want to do that is so that you don't change the timestamps of the original disk in any way, right? And data analysis is time consuming. And then, of course, we complete the case, right? So some of the things which you look forward to in the case report is who, what, when, why, where, and how, right? We need to explain some of these in our notes. Right? We'll leave critiquing the case. Now, before I go into digital storage formats, what I'm going to do is I'll just take you through a quick lab session, right? Now, these are tools which you can use yourself. Okay, let me start with this. Now, if you Google the name Eric Zimmerman, right? You just need to Google, you'll find that he has released lots of tools. I will show you a few more tools. Oh, sorry, you can't see this. I'm so sorry. This is. Right. Can you see my, the screen has changed now?
Yeah, it's changed now.
It's changed, right? Okay. So if you go to a website for, just search for Eric Zimmerman, CMD, for example. Okay, Eric Zimmerman's tools. I went to. So if you go to Eric Zimmerman's tools, right? There are a lot of tools listed here, which can be used for basic investigation, right? And I'm saying maybe you get your friend's laptop, you get your someone's laptop, and you want to know what they've been doing on their laptop, right? You can use some of the tools which is provided, right? For example, there's a command here I'm going to run called lecmd. It'll take a minute to run. Right? It's searching for link files on my Windows laptop. Right? This is more of a Windows-based tool. I just broke it there. And it's spewed out a lot of data, which I can put into a file. What it's showing me is what are the things that I have done on this particular computer, right? What are the things I've done on this computer? So for example, I uninstalled ctools on it, right? I ran uninstall ctools. And it gives me the date, the time. This was on 5/11 at 11 a.m. I've uninstalled it, right? Then I use a tool called Cheat Engine very often to view data in the memory, in computer memory, right? So I ran Cheat Engine. And when did I run it? This was as early as yesterday, 6/18, right? 18/6. So that's yesterday at around 5 p.m. Right, Gizha? So using a tool like this, just a simple command, I'm able to tell what are the commands a person has run on this computer, right? Otherwise, would you know, right? See, I've run Microsoft Edge, the Microsoft Edge browser. I ran the Microsoft Edge browser here on the system on 11/3, right? That's last year, November 3rd, at around 11 a.m. Right? And so on and so forth. It gives out a lot of information like this, right? It's not necessarily in sequence, it's mixed, right? Right? So for example here, OneDrive desktop. The OneDrive was invoked, right? And so on. So don't you think something like this is very useful during an investigation? It's basic things. You could use it as students. You want to know what has been run on a computer, or you give, Gizha, you give your computer to your brother, right? Or your sister, and they give it back, and you want to know what they have run, if they have done something on your laptop, though they claim they've done only one thing, you can run a tool like this and see what operations do they perform, right? It's a free tool. Now, let me go to another tool. Now, this is another tool called the Windows Prefetch Viewer. Right. Again, it's a free tool by Nirsoft. You can just download it from there. It shows you what programs were loaded on this computer, right, in the recent past. So, and it also tells you when. So, for example, I installed 7-zip on this particular computer yesterday, right, evening, or when was it? Yeah, probably at night, 10:47, right? It says this software was installed. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know that something was installed, right? Access Data FTK was installed on this computer a while ago, right? Accounts control. So Angry Birds, right? Angry Birds was installed on this computer. This is actually a small gaming laptop that I use for games, and my kids also use it just for gaming around. So these are some of the programs that have been run in the recent past, right? It also tells you which date, which time. It's sorted by file. Here you go. If I sort it by creation time, it says I ran ipconfig. I needed to know, I needed to connect to this computer. If you notice, I'm using a remote desktop here, right? I needed to connect to it. So for that, I needed to know the IP address of this computer. So I logged into the computer and I ran the command ipconfig. And there you go. It shows me that the command ipconfig was run, right? .NET runtime was run. LECMD was run. I just ran LECMD, right? So it's saying that here, if I sort by last runtime, it'll hone it down even more, right? What command was run in the immediate recent past, right? Then we have another tool called Shellbikes. This again is free, right? All of you can download it and use it. And this tool will again tell you what resources were accessed on this computer in the recent past. So for example, I looked for the desktop, right? So on the desktop, these are some of the tools. First, these are some of the interactions that have taken place in the recent past, right? So if I look for last interacted, sort by last interacted, the root folder was accessed in the recent past, right? Then the documents folder, shared drive, right? The registry was accessed, the downloads folder was accessed, Windows 11 was update took place, and so on. It gives us detailed information. It's very simple. All you need to do is go in, say, load active registry. It tells you what things have happened with the registry. Now, I'll show you another tool, very nifty tool. Okay. Don't want Shellback Explorer. Yes. Yes. The thumbnail viewer, right? Oh, come on. Show me the program. Yes. Now, if I look at this computer and the pictures on this computer, say Photos app, and open one of these, right? Say pictures. Do you see my camera roll my camera roll is empty, isn't it? There are no pictures there. Save pictures. There are no pictures here too. Right? It's empty. Let me go into another user ID, kids, right? And look at pictures there. Screenshots. There are some screenshots, right? These screenshots seem to be screenshots of the screen itself, the Windows screen. Do you see any pictures? Nothing, right? There are no pictures here. But now here's the beauty, Gizha. I use thumbnail viewer, and from I'm accessing the other user ID, user kits, app data, local Microsoft Windows Explorer. From Windows Explorer, I'm going to open the icon cache, right? There's an icon cache. These are files. These are not icon. I'll open the thumbnail cache. I'll open this thumbnail cache, 1280. There are no photos on my computer. But when I open the thumbnail cache, and you look at this here, come on. I finished with the prefetch viewer. You'll see that all of this is empty. There's nothing there. Yeah, there we go. Now, isn't this interesting? These photos don't exist on this laptop anymore. Right? They're not there anymore. I think you can see. But the thumbnail is still stored here. This is from an event from, I think it was 2020 or so, 2019 maybe. Right? And these are still stored here in the thumbnail cache. Right? Can you believe that? And this is from a while ago. Right? All the thumbnails, all the photos that were there on this computer, on this Windows computer, are stored here. Right? So these are some simple tools you can use, right, to perform digital forensics. I'm talking about, since you're new to this, I don't want to make it too heavy, right? These are some of the tools which you can use. There's another tool called Autopsy, right, which I will show you in a minute. There's an interesting tool that I use called Cheat Engine. It helps with games. Right? Now, here's an example of Cheat Engine at work. Right? So Cheat Engine is a tool which you can run in the background. You can attach it to any process running on your Windows computer. Okay. So for example, here I'm going to attach it to the tutorial, Cheat Engine tutorial, right? All right, so now in this, what I'll do is let me search. You see a password down here? Gizha? You see a password down there, bottom of the screen. It's 090453, right? I've attached myself using Cheat Engine to this process, this small tutorial process. And I say scan, right? 090453. Okay, I filled in the password. 090453. Okay, and I click OK. Now, let me scan for this value. Oh. Exact value. It's 4 bytes. For some reason, it's not able to find it. Okay, let me try another thing. It says the health is 100. So let's scan for 100. Then I say hit me, 95.
Sorry, Prof.
Right?
Your time is still 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah, 5
Yeah,
minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Right, I'll just show you a top C. So now, if you notice, you see the health here has become 95. I'll say hit me again. It becomes 94, right? You can say next scan 94. Now, if I select this, I can go in and change my health to 2000, right? Now, do you see that? The health has become a different number. I'll change it to 10,000. I'm able to modify what a third-party program is doing, this program is doing, using this program called Cheat Engine. Okay? So that's the power of digital forensics. You can go in and analyze in real time, right, what a program is running. Now, the last tool I would like to show you is, hang on, UTM, where's my UTM? UTM is here, right? One UTM, those 11. Oops. Just a second. What happened? Just give me a minute. Something wrong with this. Window, move window to right side of screen. Okay. Right, that rescued it. Now I need to find the window again and very quickly move it to, oops, it's not letting me. Okay, hang on. Move tile to left screen. Okay. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, I still see your screen.
All right, fine. This is another Windows computer that I have running here. Okay. Now, this is a tool called Autopsy. Autopsy is a beautiful free tool that you can download, right, from their website, salutekit.org. It runs on Linux and the Mac, but I would say that it's easier to run it on Windows. You can run it on any platform, right? Now, what I've done here is I have a data source. My data source is a logical file, right, that I have got using, you could use a tool like Access Data FTK, right, and download all the data from a particular hard disk, right? So for example, here, this data is from a phone. It's not from a hard disk, okay? And after importing it, so I go in and I say, for example, data sources, right? This is the data source, logical file set 1, right? This is the data that has been imported. If you notice, some of you who are a little more tech savvy would have noticed that your phone would have folders like this, right? I've imaged that phone, right? I imaged the phone, took a copy here, and now let me look at the data in there. Make it bigger. Now, there were 2 phone calls made from this phone, This is one number, and this is the second phone number. This is the date and time, 2022 at 2:46. That is when the phone call was made, right? There is an MMS DB in there. These are some of the phone numbers saved on this phone, right? Now let's look at the messages. These are the SMSs that have been sent, right? This is the text of the message. We've been able to extract all of this, right? Using this tool from a phone, right? Just from the image of phone, we can extract all of this. You can look at the web accounts, right? You can see that this was the user ID used that is stored on this phone. This is the program name. So someone has gone to google.com and hey, isn't this interesting? You have a password here, right? So even the password, if stored, would be stored. But of course, the password has been stored in a hashed form, right? But it's still there, right? There are a lot of entries, most of them going to google.com, right? So someone's accessed Google, right? Cookies. There's a lot we can tell from the cookies on a system. So this user has gone to YouTube, site improve analytics, right? A lot of Google, ccsf.edu, Yahoo, doubleclick.net, right? These are all the websites that the person has gone to. Isn't this interesting information that we have recovered from this device, right? Just looking at the cookies, right? And the cookies, of course, will give more detailed information about when the cookie was made, so you'll be able to tell when the person visited that site, right? If there's a web history, you'd be able to extract the web history also. Like, for example, kitten war. All of this has been extracted from this device and also the search. The search history, hockey masks, fake blood, Naval Academy, all of this has been extracted from the system, right? So these are a few of the tools that can be used in digital forensics, right? And of course, digital forensics is very vast. I've just scratched the surface. There is a beautiful there's a beautiful operating system called Kali Linux, which all of you should explore at some point. I'm not going to go into the rest of the slides for now, right? Over to you, Gizha, for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Chetan, for giving us such an informative and interesting presentation. For ladies and gentlemen, now let's move to the question and answer session. If you want to ask, you can use the chat box or raise hand feature.
Right. So, yes, are there any questions? Well, I suppose not, right? It may have been too technical for the people.
Okay, we have some question here in the chat box, Prof. You want me to read it, or you want to read it by yourself?
Right. So when it comes to people involved from another country, then you need to, usually the process would be either you extradite them, right? Like the US is doing right now. They do it very often. They extradite people wherever you have a treaty. Otherwise, you need to file a case in that particular country, right? In that country of origin with the law enforcement agencies there, right? And run the case there with the legal team there in case we don't have an extradition treaty. And of course, across Europe, the case I mentioned was predominantly across the EU. Most of the countries there are interlinked to each other, so they don't really have a problem with arresting across borders in Europe, within the EU. Right? But if it's outside the EU, then it would be an issue. Right. So when it comes to the Personal Data Protection Act, if we talk about India, right? India has a very, very robust Personal Protection Data Act. They're actually updating it as of this week, right? So for example, now the government has mandated that all service providers in India, including Google, Microsoft, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of them need to host Indian data in India, right? So if the user account has been created by an Indian in India, then that data should be stored in India. And as a net effect of that, we've actually had a boom in data centers, right? We've had a huge number of data centers coming up with massive storage, right? Because all these countries have had to move personal data into India. Now, my own personal data, when it is in India, in theory, cannot be accessed by any agency or entity unless they go through the due process of law. Right? Unless I've made that data public myself. So we have a very robust IT Act in place, right, to protect individuals' data. Yes, Tunpa, from question for you to share. Employee using a company computer including a warning not to use it for personal purposes, but used it to send files from his personal email to another email outside the country. Okay. The company's IT department hacked into the computer system and discovered that the files being transmitted were company secrets, right? Monitor the screen, saw that the employee's personal email activity. Right. To start, right, I would not call it hacking, right? It would be incorrect to use the term hacking, because if the company's IT department is accessing their own resources, the company resources, then it cannot be deemed hacking. They are entitled. So actually, in many companies in India and the US and Europe, we install special software that monitor everything the employee does, including any personal accounts they access, right? It will log everything, right? And that is permitted legally because that is a company device, right? And if they're using that company device for any purposes, even for personal purposes, that is deemed company data, right? So to start, I would not call it hacking, and it does not violate the person's privacy, right? Because you're using that company's system. Now, I'll tell you where the complexity comes in, right? The complexity comes in with BYOD, bring your own device, right? So very often these days, you would see universities, you would see private companies, they let employees bring their own private computer in, right? And link it into the network. because of whatever reasons, it reduces costs very often. Right? In that case, it becomes a gray area. Right? In that case, it may not be permitted for the company to go in and look at the person's private data. Do you think in the future AI can perform digital forensic reveals, international crime measures that are extended to users? Absolutely. It's not in the future, it's already happening now. We have AI engines monitoring, but usually it is at the company level. We have AI engines monitoring companies and looking for traces of abnormal activity. It's already happening, right? It's been happening for the last 3-4 years, just that nobody spoke about it so much, but now with the AI boom, everyone is talking about it, right? So I hope that answers your question. Shalaika, right? So nice to connect with you, Shalaika. So currently, many people are sending hate speech through social media, which is considered a digital crime. So how do we deal with it? That is an interesting question. That depends on what is deemed as hate speech, right? So, for example, it is deemed who is in power. The person in power would decide if it is hate speech or not, right? Say, for example, if it's against a religion, it may not matter who is in power. But say, if I criticize a political party, right, and that political party happens to be in power, right, it may be deemed a hate speech. But if that political party is not in power, it may not be deemed a hate speech. So then it depends on the individual countries, right? Infrastructure. So, for example, right now in India, we have a lady who made a speech in 2010, right? She made a speech in 2010 talking about certain things she disagreed with the government at that point in time, right? It's 2024 now. The government has pulled that out and she's going to be jailed for it, right? Because it does not align with the current government. At that time, it was okay. The previous government did not mind, right? Though she did not talk against the government, it was some general topic she was talking about. The current government does not agree with her viewpoint. And so they're using that statement given 14 years ago to arrest her now. So it's a gray area to call it a digital crime. It depends on what it is, right? Especially on social media. So I hope that answers your question. Halima, right, from Green University of Bangladesh. Oh, nice to connect with you, right? Been to Bangladesh many times. How to process or remove forensic international crime? Now, that is an interesting topic. Removing it entirely may be tough, right? Now, I can talk to you about what India is doing right now in this space. To start, they're working on the concept of caller ID. Now, we all have Truecaller, right? We have Truecaller on our phones. The problem with Truecaller is you can give any name you want to. So now the government is considering bringing out a rule saying that whichever name that phone number is registered in, that name will appear on the person's phone mandatorily, right? So you would know who is calling you to start, one. Then second, they're making it tougher to make international payments, right? So which means that people from outside the country will not be able to take money out of the country as easily, right? Of course, we are also monitoring IP addresses globally. We're monitoring domain names globally, right? But domestic crime is still there. They have started cracking down on illegal apps, especially cryptocurrency apps. They're forcing people like Google to remove those apps, right? So it is a long drawn process to fight international crime. It's not, every day we read about people across the world, including Indonesia, old people losing their money to cyber fraudsters operating globally, right? So there is a crackdown. They are monitoring more and more systems, right? Monitoring websites, monitoring payment sites. They're bringing in new banking regulations saying that when money is transferred, the bank needs to hold on to it for some time. It cannot just be transferred out to third parties immediately. And if it is transferred to a third party, it should be possible to retrieve it back from that third party. It's the bank's prerogative. They're going to enforce that at the bank level. So these are some of the things which they're doing to reduce, I cannot say remove, but reduce the occurrence of international crime, cross-border crime that's taking place.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Our ladies and gentlemen, our time for question and answer is over. So maybe we have some occasion next time to discussion about this theme. Thank you very much, Professor Chetan, for your answers.
Right.
As
Thank
we
you.
come- yeah.
And if anyone has any questions, Gizha, they're most welcome to email me. You have my email ID. You could share it with the participants in case.
Okay. Okay, I will write your email ID in chat box.
Right. Okay, I can write it here then. Okay. So
As
you
we
can
come to the end of our
happy
session.
to answer any questions, right? So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day ahead. Have a great session ahead, right?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. You
Take
can
care.
left the Zoom meeting. You wish.
Right.
So,
Thank
to all
you.
participants, you can fill the attendance list that appears on the chat rooms. Once again, I would like to say thank you to our speaker of the session, Professor Chetan, for the presentation. It's really insightful. We really appreciate it, and we hope that the session will improve our knowledge. Other than that, we also saying thank you to all of the participants that are already joining the session. And for a reminder, tomorrow we still have other session with different speaker, and it will be starting at 9 a.m. in Indonesia time. Lastly, I would like to say sorry if there's a lot of mistake. Once again, thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Right. Thank you. Thank you to you, Gizha, and to your wonderful university for hosting this session. Right. It's been a privilege to be a part of this group. Thank you. Right. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, Prof.
Bye-bye, Pak.